Hello and welcome along to the first, if I post this one first, the first episode of this YouTube channel, or rather indeed of this podcast, or whatever this really turns out to be, because I have to be honest, at this point, I don't really know. And it doesn't really matter, because at this current point of recording, I'm talking to no one, because I have no followers at all. Hello to emptiness. So in the absence of having no one listen to this, or at least for now, the topics are up for debate, really. The topics that I choose are literally that. I've got nothing to base what any potential viewers may quite like to see. So I'm just here on my own, all willy-nilly, picking out topics that I think might be interesting to you. You'll probably guess quite quickly that the recordings that I do, the content that I put out, it's not going to be it's not going to be very polished. I'm going to have some sort of structure to these to the content, but I'm largely just going to come on and until I get to the point where people want to at least participate to some way in some way, shape, or form on this channel. It's just going to be me talking into, again, an empty void. So I'm not going to waste. I've got a lot of things to do away from this now project. So I'm not going to try and waste a lot of time. A lot of content creators, they try and cut together and piece together and make their you see their content all the time where it makes it look like they really flourished the first time that they recorded, and it's all put out in this nice and neat and orderly, and that's probably too much effort for me, to be fair. So look, this week then, in one of my first episodes to you, something that you hopefully will watch at some point, but that point will probably be much later down the line from when it was actually recorded. It was actually when I was in the process of just about starting this channel, just about starting this show, when I noticed a news report on Julian Assange. This was on April 10th, 2024, and how potential charges against him, or how charges against him could potentially be dropped. So I figured, why not, in one of the first episodes, I suppose, cover more generally the topic of whistleblowing, because it's something that I think should be maybe of much more interest to us in an era when we have such great skepticism about political figures and corporations and what have you. And to be fair, we've had this skepticism for a very long time. It kind of fluctuates in terms of its volatility, this great skepticism, this great critique we have on the grassroots, or the minions level of society against those who are of great wealth and power above us on that social hierarchy. But when someone is or emerges as a whistleblower, and there are plenty, there's whistleblowing all the time, but when someone emerges of or revealing content or basically just bringing revelations of great magnitude, there seems to be great division on the purpose, the role, the validity of whistleblowing. And we've seen a number of divisive figures over the last few decades, but particularly over the last 10 to 15 years as well. So without really specifying or going into Julian Assange specifically, because I'm hoping that this channel, this show is going to, well, this is the first of many recordings and episodes that I'm going to be doing. So Julian Assange and content, Julian Assange and WikiLeaks and whistleblowing isn't something that's going to be a one and done on this channel. So I think I'd rather take a bit more of a broader consideration in the absence of anybody to comment or provide WhatsApps or even call in, which is an ambition of the show somewhere down the line. I'm just going to go over some of the points that I would think are some of the most interesting, some of the most important. And we can always use this as a bit of a base point, maybe refer back to this in future episodes. So we will, of course, touch upon Julian Assange and what he contributed, what he brought to the table, how he features in this discussion. But we're not going to exclusively focus on him. We're not really going to focus exclusively on any one particular whistleblower, albeit we may mention a few. But first, we need to consider, I suppose, what actually is whistleblowing. So a whistleblower is a person who exposes information or the activities from within an organization or well, I suppose that term organization would cover a government body as well as a corporation. So a whistleblower is a person who exposes information or the activities from within an organization that are illegal, unethical, or simply just not correct. They're not of good standing to the public or those in positions of authority. So that definition, that it already signifies then that this is quite an important topic. This is, when someone whistleblows and they are justified in their blowing of the whistle, then it has to be, by the definition, it has to be within the public interest. Because if it's not within the public interest, then whistleblowers are subject to, and it's a point that I'll raise again later in this episode, whistleblowers are subject to all manner of legal proceedings against them. So it is quite important that it is quite vital for whistleblowers before whistleblowing that they are absolutely sure that what it is that they are about to divulge to the public is for the public's best interests. So whistleblowing is, again, just to further on maybe just our general understanding, because one of the points of this channel is that I would really like to explore, sometimes academically. I'll try not to make it so dry, but one of the points of this channel nonetheless is to meaningfully explore definitions, because without that, then we don't really know what the hell we're talking about. So we need to fully understand this, because there always will be, but I don't want to create any more confusion than what is already out there. So we really want to make sure that we have definitions nailed down. And just to further our understanding of whistleblowing, for those of you who have never encountered or thought about this topic before, it is where the wrongdoing that a whistleblower discloses. Again, this must be within the public interest, and this means it must affect others, just not them, other than themselves. This has to be within the public interest, for the wider utility of society, or at least a significant section thereof. So it must be within the interest of the general public. And whistleblowers can raise concerns. Typically, they should be able to raise concerns from within the organization from which they belong. And the point of whistleblowing, or at the point of blowing the whistle, it is because all other or these avenues, internal avenues, have been exhausted, or maybe in some cases they just aren't there anyway, even though they should. So look, we've seen quite a few whistleblowers down the years. We've seen the likes of Mark Felt, Deep Throat. Please bear in mind that if you now are sitting there trying to Google who Mark Felt is, if you Google simply Deep Throat, you're probably not going to get the search return that you maybe might think that you will. We've also saw the likes of Daniel Ellsberg, who released the Pentagon Papers. We've seen Joe Darby in around 2005 whistleblow on the goings-on of British and predominantly American soldiers in the Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq. We've also seen Chelsea Manning the so-called collateral murder release of documentations, again, on the operations of the US government. And that was actually via Julian Assange's WikiLeaks. And then in 2013, we saw the likes of Edward Snowden, who released information on, again, once more, the operations of the US security services, their data collection, their bulk data collection on US citizens. And for his troubles, he is now still, at the time of recording this, still residing pretty much in exile in Russia, owing to the fact that he would be prosecuted under the Espionage Act if and when, currently speaking, under the current conditions, if he returns to the United States. So look, let's talk about whistleblowing. Let's consider its purpose. Let's consider, even if you're watching this, again, in the absence of any audience at all, consider in retrospect, if you have experienced whistleblowing, maybe someone that you've worked with or someone that you've belonged within a certain type of environment has whistleblown, or perhaps maybe you have. So if any of those variables are applicable to you, then this episode may well be for you. If not, maybe just generally try to understand a little bit more about this topic. So suppose, we need a question, which I'll try and provide on or during every episode. So suppose the overarching question is, where do we stand on whistleblowers? Are they heroes, or are they traitors? And again, it's a divisive question. It really, really is. The likes of particularly Chelsea Manning and Edward Snowden for years have been tugging on that social sentimental chord in terms of that very question: are they heroes, or are they traitors? Taking Edward Snowden as an example, has released NSA documents to the media in a very, as much as what he could, in a controlled way, released documentation on the surveillance operations of the United States security services. And this also, I suppose, set the record straight, it also implemented the likes of GCHQ in the United Kingdom and other security services around the globe. But despite the fact that the information that he released was relating to data, private citizen data, bulk collected, which the United States government had no mandate, they had no legislation to do. Despite this being in the public interest, despite this being in the interest of the millions of United States citizens who had unknowingly their communications information collected covertly by their own government, it was still a divisive thing to do then by Edward Snowden to release the information that he did into the public domain. And it's baffling maybe sometimes as to why. And I can understand this question from both sides of the fence. I probably lean more one way, more so than the other. But nevertheless, I can understand both sides of the argument. For those who are more... No, I was going to say patriotically aligned, but you could be a patriot on both sides of this argument. But for those who are, I don't want to pigeonhole people. I'm going to try not to. It's going to happen, I know, but I'm going to try not to when I'm aware of it. So in trying to avoid pigeonholing people as being, I don't know. I was going to say, I keep coming back to this word patriot, but it's not the word I'm looking for. And we're going to get a lot of this if you keep watching. There's a lot of this sort of mental confusion, this cognitive confusion I have just with myself, trying to find the right bloody word. Those who support whistleblowing, the argument would be that, yes, it is within the public interest. In the case of Edward Snowden or Chelsea Manning, Joe Darby, for example, all these whistleblowers, we'll keep it with the United States for now, releasing information on the operations of the government, which ties in and implements also the United States Army. There are those who are so pro-army, which is fine. It's okay. That's nothing wrong with that. Of course, they do good work. But there are those who are so pro-United States security or pro-national security, because of course you get that in any country, here in the United Kingdom, of course, also, who would turn a blind eye or would just rubbish it off, as they probably have ultimate faith in the security services, and by extension then, you kind of have to have faith in the government as well, whether you know it or not. If your faith only extends to the army, it has to extend to government as well, because they're quite closely aligned. They are, of course, different entities, but of course they're very closely aligned as well. And there are those for whom the security services, particularly the army, can do no wrong. So the release of such delicate and covert documentation is seen as an assault on the country itself. It's seen as an assault on patriotism. It's seen as a betrayal of the national interests. It's seen as a betrayal to each and every one of the citizens of the particular country from which we're talking about. So I can see both sides. I'm probably a pinch of both. I'm a percentage of both. I don't know how much of which on each side of this argument I particularly am, but nevertheless, I can see both. I wouldn't say I'm 100% or absolutely one or the other. Sometimes whistleblowing is done in a very poor way. It's done in a way that doesn't quite protect the information being released as well as what it should, because we have to remember that some information that is released can cause harm and detriment, particularly if we are talking about security operations that can implement and damage other people in other ways. But nevertheless, the potential for such information release to protect us from our own governments at times is nevertheless something that should be protected. And it's very, very difficult to find a line of acceptance here. So if you are watching this whenever you are, in great hindsight, I would think, from the time you come to know of this channel, it is worth trying to think about this, let's look back retrospectively at some of the great whistleblowing cases of the past and just consider where you sit. And it's going to be different on the individual merits of each of these whistleblowers, because, of course, there are very, very different reasons for whistleblowing. We're trying to keep it a little bit more general in this episode, but nevertheless, it is quite difficult to just maybe talk about the whole topic and categorize it as either heroes or traitors. But damn it, we're going to give it at least a little bit of a try to generalize, because we don't have time to talk about every single bloody whistleblower. So, look, like I said, we can understand, I think, to at least, even if you're against all forms of whistleblowing, or if you're against and have been or are now quite stringently against some examples of whistleblowing, some particular, your Snowdens or your Mannings or your Julian Assanges, who set up a whole bloody platform for the release discreetly, when I say discreetly, covertly, of information through WikiLeaks. We should, I think, those of us who are perhaps a little bit more open-minded, should be able to at least consider, even if you aren't against or you're not for the practice, you should be able to consider the whys of it. So it is a big responsibility. It's a big risk to speak out against unethical or illegal practices, because there's a bunch of ethical concerns. A lot of whistleblowers you tend to find, and a great example of this point in the weighing up of the ethical concerns is to watch Citizen 4, which was recorded from a hotel room by Edward Snowden as he was meeting with reporters and releasing the information that he released. And the ethical concerns were banged about by all involved. But nevertheless, the ethical concerns that that may be encountered as a result of the release, ultimately, it's then deduced, and it has to be, otherwise we would never know this information. The ethical duty to expose the wrongdoing of the institutions, the corporations for which these people belong to or did belong to, trumps the potential ethical concerns of the release. So the wrongdoing, the illegalities, the unethical practices that are harming other people trump the potential ethical concerns that would be involved or could potentially be involved by the release of the information. So you tend to find that when interviewed or when researched into, these concerns are considered. They're generally well weighed up by the whistleblower or whistleblowers involved. They may have personal convictions, whistleblowers. They may have they're going to have, because otherwise, why would you bother with the hassle? They're going to have strong personal beliefs and values that conflict with the actions of the organizations that they work for. It's all, and it happens quite a bit. We'll see this by politicians. We'll see this in the media. This treacherous behavior, this kind of jobs worth type behavior of whistleblowers. But looking beyond the I suppose quite simplistic, quite basic rhetoric in media speak, in political speak, whistleblowers, if nothing else, they have strong personal beliefs. They have typically some strong values. You may disagree with those values, but nevertheless, they have some convictions about them. Otherwise, because they know at the very least they're going to get sacked. They're going to lose their job. But that's all very unlikely to be where the buck stops. You'll often see that corporations and governments and whoever the bigger power is in these scenarios like to make examples of whistleblowers where they can. So if whistleblowing, and this is the risk, if whistleblowing does not, if the information released does not qualify as whistleblowing, it does not qualify for protection legally. And it is fair game then for the person releasing information to be sued to high heaven and potentially face some jail time as well. So the stakes are well beyond just being removed from a position of employment. Whistleblowers may also seek a desire for justice. They, and again, tied into these personal convictions. That seeking of justice, they often would want to protect the public interest, and let's have it as well. They may well have some career dissatisfaction. They may well have some grudge against, particularly if it's a corporate employee. They may well have some grievance. Maybe, I don't know, they missed out on a promotion or something. Who knows? Maybe they didn't get that pay rise that they wanted. But nevertheless, I would imagine, I would say, and from my own research into this topic, I would say that the personal duty that they feel to you trumps everything else. More often than not. Yes, some people on the smaller scale, the less publicized scale of whistleblowing, yeah, and it has been found that or at least supported anyway, that some people have disclosed information where they shouldn't have. There was no justification for the disclosure of some information, and they have been appropriately and legally dealt with as a result. But some of these bigger cases that we've seen down the years have, I'd like to say, at least been justified for. Again, you might not agree, with the whistleblowing practice, but it's maybe still hard to disagree that it hasn't involved harm to the public. Okay, so that needs to be remembered. So before we instantly jump on maybe a media or and certain political entity led bandwagon that all whistleblowers are bad and certain whistleblowers are even worse, we should probably consider the why of it and what these people have gone through professionally and publicly to provide you at least with an insight as to what these very powerful, very rich institutions, organizations have been doing outside of the view of your knowledge. But look, like I said, whistleblowing should be, and it has to be, to satisfy legal protections. It has to be one, within the public interest, but it also needs to, or the whistleblower has to have exhausted all the other forms of approaching their the entity that they've got issue with. So organizations should have channels set up from within for complaints or concerns to be brought to management and whoever else is higher up on that food chain. Beyond that, and not every organization has unions, but unions are another way of getting the attention of those who basically probably aren't given that much attention to the misgivings that an employee or whomever has. Outside of that, at the more extreme end, there are outside NGOs, non-governmental organizations. There's, as Edward Snowden did, for example, there's release of documentation or information to the mainstream media, who, if you actually have a bit of a Google search, The Guardian, Whistleblowing or what have you, they've probably got that. They do, absolutely, and most other news organizations, I would imagine, do as well, will have mechanisms in place to disclose or drop information discreetly. So you can go in and drop information that will not be linked back to you. And of course, then there's also legal mechanisms as well. You can go and seek legal advice, and the general advice is that you probably should have a good legal understanding of your protections before you actually do. So look, all of these are considered. There's a bit of a chain of a bit of a process here that needs to be legally satisfied. In the United Kingdom, legal protections are gained through the Public Interest Disclosure Act of 1998. In the United States, there's a few of them that whistleblowing could fall under, like the Whistleblowing Protection Act of 1989, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002, the Consumer Financial Protection Act of 2010. So there are legal protections. Whistleblowing, we need to I suppose, rid what can be a common misconception that whistleblowing is out and out an illegal activity. Because, again, when certain political figures talk and their supporting media acolytes talk, then one may be forgiven for thinking that whistleblowing is out and out an illegal activity. That's not the case. It does have to satisfy certain criteria, but whistleblowing can and is a legal thing to do. So we need to recognize that. So when, first and foremost, it is deemed to be within public interest, and all these other sort of variables come and align, and one qualifies for protections under whistleblowing legislation, that should already tell you that the information being disclosed should be bloody well interesting to us. We should sit up and take notice, because in my book, if they are protected, legislatively speaking, then the information that they're disclosing is probably of interest to us and absolutely should be taken into consideration. And look, like I said, pick any whistleblower, and they have suffered. They really have. There's a great documentary on Netflix, actually, 3 Mile Island. Only 3 episodes, about an hour, 90 minutes long. I've watched that about a year and a half ago. And there's some great examples there of some of the pains that whistleblowing in that particular was a near miss when it came to a nuclear plant meltdown in Philadelphia, and some of the pains, some of the threats, some of the issues for whistleblowers within that particular scenario. As I mentioned earlier, Edward Snowden is currently living in Russia. In effect, he's living in exile. Julian Assange, again, I've mentioned living in a bloody embassy with a cat for years on end, didn't really see the light of day for such a long time. Chelsea Manning saw prison. Joe Darby saw great pressure placed upon him and his family as well, death threats and what have you. Going back to even Deep Fruit in a few decades ago, basically remained under that code name, owing to the fact that he knew there would be great persecutions, great safety concerns for him as well. So look, yeah, we need to understand then that the risks for whistleblowers are great. Okay, so this should be recognized when these stories hit news headlines, because no doubt, well, there's always going to be whistleblowing. For as long as there is state criminality and corporate illegalities, there is going to be whistleblowers. So we need to recognize them for what they are. And like I said, I'm still not on the fence. I do lean towards the value of whistleblowing, absolutely. However, in certain scenarios, whistleblowing can be done quite recklessly, and that also needs to be acknowledged. So that is, I think, where I'm going to leave it for this particular one of my first episodes. I hope it has been enjoyable for you. These episodes are going to get, hopefully, that little bit better as I get along. Do acknowledge the amateuristic nature of this channel in its early days. Even right down to, you can see the bloody ring light in my glasses. There will be minor improvements as this channel moves along, no doubt. But for now, though, just a bit of a final thought on this note, or on this particular topic. Bit of a Jerry Springer moment. And now for my final thoughts. And my final thoughts, I suppose, would be, don't be persuaded by particularly tabloid news, and at the moment in the United Kingdom in particular, right-wing political rhetoric. Or it doesn't even have to be right-wing, because, well, Obama in the United States wasn't much different. Tony Blair wasn't really much different than right-wing, but where very much basically anybody who is in a position of power, in a position of leadership, are never going to be fans of whistleblowers. So don't get sucked into the immediate response from political entities and the mass media in that whistleblowing is a wrong thing to do, and it is an illegal thing to do, because again, there is protections, and it should be put down as in many instances, a public service. So I'll leave you with that. You may feel different. That's absolutely fine. But that's where we will pretty much wrap this episode up. So thank you for basically indulging in this episode with me as I get started. I'm hoping they're going to get more established, and well, the editing is getting a little bit better. It is a very alien thing for me. So if you've liked this, please like, share, and subscribe. I would like this episode, this channel to, well, of course, grow. And yeah, thank you guys, and I'll see you again next time.